Thank you guys so much for tuning in. This is kind of my little time to talk about what's happening, and I would write about it, but there's just so many exciting things happening that it's very difficult to get it down on paper systematically without telling just a story. If you read the last blog, you heard me talk about Hawaii kind of becoming my Ephesus, and this notion comes from the Lord really prompting me the question of, would I still serve Him if I never went out into the nations? And this was on the cusp of having to deal with some like hard issues with myself, just dealing with like, what is my identity as a missionary? What is my identity as someone who follows Christ? And a lot of that revolved around getting to Melanesia and Micronesia and back to Papua New Guinea. And there were so many forces, it seemed, that kept me from engaging those things. So first it was getting married and having a new wife and having a young child that I didn't want to take to the nations. And then after that, it was COVID and the borders being closed. And then we get to Hawaii and we don't have peace to leave Hawaii. And I started realizing how much of my identity was being challenged and saying, like, God, when am I going to get back to the nations? When am I going to serve you like the way that you called me? And the Lord reminded me that there's a fresh calling every day, right? A lot of this, don't store the manna for tomorrow, right? Eat the fresh thing for each day. And I realized that I was trying to hold on to kind of old lunch, if you will, and not really seeking the new thing. And so the Lord had prompted me with that question: would I serve Him even if I never went to the nations? And then He prompted me with the, who was it that kept Paul from going to the province of Asia? And it said that the Holy Spirit forbade him from going. And Paul essentially ends up in Ephesus for 3 years, for arguably his most fruitful ministry time, making disciples who ultimately went to the nations and went and reached the people of Asia. And so the Lord really graciously has drawn this correlation of Hawaii kind of being my Ephesus. Once I came to terms with that and really settled in to think, wow, that makes sense, a series of events occurred. And those series of events are suddenly an increase in tours at the farm. And when I'm here at the farm giving tours, I kind of cater what I talk about to the interest of the group, right? If they're just passing through and they want to see aquaponics, I'll focus on the science and tech part. But this was a group of pastors, and I really wanted to challenge the pastors with the idea of most places don't have a theology of the land. They don't really think about, the time before Genesis 3 when God is giving commands to Adam and Eve to steward the earth. And how that didn't change just because we have Matthew 28. So there's kind of these two commissions at play. There's this stewarding the earth, but also post Genesis 3, right? In light of the fall, we have this reclamation commission of Matthew 28 to go and make disciples. And when you begin to do both at the same time, when you pursue the stewardship of the earth and doing things God's ways, there's a natural door open to make disciples. And that's ultimately what we teach here at the farm. And this is what we are discipling into our students. But I really challenged the pastors with this. And in so doing, there's kind of one of the big wig kind of leaders on campus was part of that group. And he gave me a personal shout out, like in front of all of the staff, and was pretty blown away by what I had to say. And that's not a big head sort of thing. It was just, he himself was challenged. That kind of reverberated through multiple channels of leadership, and they all began to agree that what is happening at the farm is perhaps one of the most exciting things that we can do here on the campus. That the missing component to what we do in missions and missions training is the sustainable aspect. And not just sustainable in does missions keep going, but the fact that when you get boots on the ground, are you apostolic? Is what we're doing creating paternalism, or is it creating competencies in local indigenous groups? And are those competencies things that we bring, or is it our partnering with what they're already doing? And these are all things we teach in our school. And so there's been this change, this spotlight that's been moving to what we do at the farm in light of community development and how we train not just missionaries, but how we train specifically YWAMers in their DTS and what's beyond, and how we need to course correct. And it has suddenly put the farm in the front of a lot of conversations. And so for me, I'm looking at this and thinking, wow, like once I relinquished my rights to get back to the nations, suddenly I found myself rubbing shoulders with people who can effectuate large-scale change in how the University of the Nations trains disciples for long-term thinking and sustainable development and sustainable missions. And so there's kind of a joke that YWAM, which is Youth of the Mission, is also Youth of the Meeting, because there are a lot of meetings. But these are the type of meetings that can honestly create the environment where people would reach the province of Asia if you kind of kept that Ephesians thing going. So it's been really exciting getting to know some of the higher leadership here on campus and having bigger picture conversations than just running a school, but actually tooling out curriculum, coming up with effective models for change. And even Ben, who's the head of training here on the farm, we have a trip to Costa Rica at the end of January to go meet this guy named Terry Keith, who's been running the community development school for 22 years. And he helped pioneer not only the Costa Rica base, but a base in Malawi. And both of these places are science and tech hubs. And so Ben and I are on this journey to go to every science and tech hub and start unifying the curriculum, unifying the training, and finding out what actually are the best practices in sustainable missions regarding community development and all things like this. So those are all things that I never thought I'd be a part of, but are at the core of my heart, I think, what I truly desire. And the Lord knew this, and he was so gracious and so kind and so patient to prompt me ahead of time, right? Like God knew all these meetings were going to happen, but I would have missed it if my heart posture wasn't relinquishing my rights to get back to the nations and getting rid of that frustration. And of course, now the result is I get to go even more places because now we have inroads and purpose to go ahead and do it. So it's just been absolutely amazing. And a lot of it, my wife is actually sitting right off camera over there. And so I'm going to say this so she can hear it. Is that like a lot of this wouldn't be possible if I didn't have an awesome wife who supports me in these things. And I say that to tie into something that I remember years ago, the Lord saying, the type of work that I'm calling you to do is going to require a wife. And I never really realized how that would be beneficial. In fact, up until probably last month, I thought it wasn't beneficial at all to do missions as a family, but it's actually created a lot of stability, and yeah, it's just been awesome. So that's Greg's Grotto, if you will. If you've listened this far, thank you so much. This is probably the biggest update that we could possibly give, because as the head of the household, I'm kind of steering some things by my own personal ambitions. But anyway, thank you guys for listening. It's been a wild ride. Keep praying for us. And honestly, I'm going to unashamedly ask, if you want to support us, please do. Monthly donations go a long way. This is no longer just our family here in Hawaii doing a school. This has suddenly become much bigger than us. It's laying the groundwork for how things get done for generations to come. So we're tugging at some pretty large strings that can effectuate some pretty large changes. So if you love the kingdom, you love God, and you love us, please support us. It allows us to do abundantly more than we can do on our own. So thank you guys. We love you, and peace out.